Good day, everyone. 'Tis I, the Blue Baron, defender of traditionalism.
It is Traditio Monarchia!
And his faithful assistant, the bearded Canadian.
And welcome to the next part of Sedantag Month and my multi-part showcasing of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, where we come to the moment you've all been waiting for, the story and its symbolism. Walt Disney's masterpiece, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, is arguably the most traditional-style fairy tale princess film in the Disney archives. When one thinks of a princess movie that embodies the old style of classic femininity, so associated with a feminine personality type referred to as princess, a thing which so many young girls and women aspire to even today, Snow White is no doubt the first to come to mind. But what if we looked at the film symbolically? And I told you that the film Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs not only tells a story of royalty in the Disneyverse/fairy tale sense of the word, but also in the sense of the real-world institution of monarchy. What if I told you that the film Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, through clear and coherent symbolism, tells the real-world story of the German monarchy, highlighting its history and its end, the rise and fall of republicanism and National Socialism, and even makes a prediction about the return of the German monarchy, and Germany finally being able to set aside the ugly ghosts of the last century and eliminate the remaining legacy of the ideology which allowed some of the most evil men in history to come to power. The only way this legacy of evil can truly be parted with is through the restoration of the German monarchy, which is the true, natural, and historic Germany, free of the revolutionary ideas of republicanism and the National Socialism they brought about. Now, I get what you're thinking. This sounds outlandish, right? I thought so too when the idea first crossed my mind. But I urge you to suspend your disbelief for just a moment as I tell you some cold, hard, historical facts that will provide some context for this theory. In the first place, the film Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was an adaptation of a highly popular German fairy tale by the Brothers Grimm, and Walt Disney kept to this cultural influence in his film by hiring some of the leading European illustrators of his time to give the whole film a European storybook feel. The idea of a fairy tale being based around real historical events is also not as outlandish as you might think, as recent historical research has found that Snow White was actually a real person, whose life story inspired the fairy tale itself. I found this out from Miss Micopede on DeviantArt, the same person who made the Snow White icon I use in my videos. Furthermore, we all know that films are often a gateway into the culture and mindset of a certain time. They often include elements that reference events currently going on at the time of their production and release. Now, guess what was currently going on when Walt Disney was making Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs? That's right, the very same things which to us are only familiar from a history textbook were at the time of Snow White current events happening in the world around them. And even the German monarchy itself, though often thought of as out of sight, out of mind, due to the treacherous betrayal and abolishment it suffered from years earlier, was still relatively fresh in people's memory, and the last legitimate German leader, His Imperial Highness Kaiser Wilhelm II, was currently living in exile in the Kingdom of the Netherlands due to having been persecuted by Germany's Republican government. Now, where else have we heard of a royal being persecuted, forced to flee, and living in a sort of exile far away from their home? Snow White! Now that I've got your attention, we shall open the book once more and look at the second instance of royal wisdom contained within monarchism. As with any huge theory like this, and you can tell it's huge because of the video length, all the evidence that I bring up at first is going to sound a bit like I'm stretching things, a bit unbelievable. But the idea is that once everything is laid out on the table, it will all start coming together as one coherent story. With that in mind, I implore you to hold out until the end. I recently found this image on DeviantArt by the awesome Autocrat. An entity made reference to how someone had said, all Disney films are monarchist propaganda. I've decided to see if this is true. In fact, the film Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs is indeed a very monarchist film.
Well, of course. It's a fairy tale about a princess and a queen.
Yes, but that's only looking at it at face value. I'm talking about monarchist symbolism, which this film presents a continuous narrative for.
I didn't see any.
That's because you're not looking. You've got to actually seek it, look for it, search every hook and granny, crooked fanny. Doc, why don't you explain it?
Search every cook and nanny, a hook and granny, a hook and nanny, a hook and granny, a crooked hook and granny, search crooked hook and search everywhere.
Thank you, Doc. The original Snow White tale is only a few pages. It is included in Grimm's Complete Fairy Tales, which I have here, and takes up only 8 of the book's over 600 pages. But in the opening for Disney's Snow White, we are presented with an entire book encasing just one story. Why? It was a rather standard device Disney used for many feature-length films, including The Sword in the Stone, The Wind in the Willows, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, The Jungle Book, etc. But the importance is referencing an authority, an author, someone who no longer exists, but their story from antiquity does exist. There is an aesthetic response, the idea of us being children again and someone opening our favorite book to read to us. But there is also the validation that the story to be told is published, preserved for all ages, and hence of value. This introduction to the story is also important because in the featurette for another Snow White movie, Mirror Mirror, the dwarfs decide to skip the storybook opening and just get on with the story, which reflects highly our cynicism today. But Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs knows everything exists within a context, and this intro and writing of what that context is lets us know that it is important. The blue fabric upon which the book rests symbolizes the wisdom being offered up for our consideration in the pages. How do we know that? The book, like our heroine, is white, so that contained therein is pure and faithful, it can be trusted. It is also edged in gold, symbolizing royalty, and in this case, the royal wisdom that will bring us all to happiness if we heed it, like Snow White, or ruin, like the Queen, if we don't. As if this theme of royalty, monarchy, wasn't hammered in enough yet, the first page of the book, which introduces Snow White, features images at the top of a crown, a white dove, and cute animals, representing Snow White's royalty, godliness, beauty, and innocence. Then at the bottom, where the text says Snow White was forced to work as a scullery maid, we see a scrub brush with a crown on top of it. Snow White may be a lowly maid for now, but her royalty is still transparent. Notice also the opening shot of the film slowly drawing us into view of the castle. This opening shot isn't just to let us know that Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs is a fairy tale, it's to let us know that we are about to be given a royal lesson on what life is and what each of us should know about living. After the color symbolism of the opening, the three prominent colors that exist in the story of Snow White are as follows: black, white, and red. They are captured in different areas of the film, most obviously and mainly in the appearance of Snow White.
Hair black as ebony, skin white as snow, lips red as the rose.
Yes, you could say that Grimhilda also has these colors on or near her face, but in her case they are not specifically called out, and are also less visible when compared to the overwhelming amount of black in her wardrobe, as well as purple, which we'll cover later. And Snow White's theme of black, white, and red is made even more prominent with her cape, which is black on the back with a white collar and a red interior, as well as by the red bow in her hair.
Where are you going with this?
The story of Snow White takes place in Germany, or Deutschreich, and these three colors shown by our protagonist are the imperial colors of the German Empire, or Second Reich. Think about that. The protagonist of a traditional German fairy tale features in her appearance most prominently the imperial colors of the German Empire. Furthermore, her dress is made up of blue and gold, which reminds one of the history of the German monarchy stretching back to the Holy Roman Empire and Charlemagne. Her cape and collar, which again are black, white, and red, are accessories placed over top of the blue and gold of her dress, just as the German Empire, or Second Reich, was built upon the foundations of the Holy Roman Empire, and was a continuation of the German monarchy, both symbolically and in the very literal way it came to be. Much like how the position of Holy Roman Empire was decided by the German prince-electors, when it came time for the Second Reich, the crown came from the same source. The German princes came together and agreed to unification on their own terms, with the imperial crown going to Prussia, which had led the way. The royal blue with gold trim in the middle of Snow White's dress confirms that she is royalty, monarchy. And the blue sleeves could also be said to represent the Prussian leadership of the Second Reich, while the gold underneath represents the Austrian and other German states' leadership of the First Reich, as well as their own unique cultures embodied by their individual monarchs. The sleeves even have a touch of red, which represents the Brandenburg half of Prussia. In short, Snow White, through her appearance and her manner of dress, represents the German monarchy. The Queen, on the other hand, I think could be seen to represent the falsehoods of Republican Germany, and also, inevitably, of the system that they led to. I've mentioned it before, and I'll do so again. When we talk of the German Empire or Second Reich, we are speaking of the natural, historic German state that existed from 1871 to 1918. We are not speaking about the Third Reich, as Hitler rather blasphemously called his regime. It is truly ironic that this is what people so often think of when they hear Reich, as Hitler's regime wasn't even a true Reich, as a Reich is a monarchy. An actual German Reich has a monarch at its head, an emperor, or in German, a Kaiser, and it retains the many German princes beneath him as well. Hitler was wrong to call this regime the Third Reich, and anyone who dislikes Hitler should join me in recognizing that by calling his regime what it was, the False Reich, which also has the added bonus of not only depriving Hitler of his legacy of lies, but also insulting him with the most piercing retort of all, the truth. The German Empire and its monarchy had nothing to do with National Socialism. It is also an incontestable fact that Hitler could never have become dictator of Germany had the Kaiser and the subsidiary monarchs of Imperial Germany retained their positions. Much like how, due to her not being royal by blood, Grimhilda would never have gained power under normal circumstances in Snow White's kingdom, only gaining it because she was the king's second wife and widow and Snow White was not yet of age, it is also true that under normal monarchist circumstances in Germany, Hitler never could have gained any power at all. The top office would have been out of the question in either the German or Austro-Hungarian empires, and it is extremely unlikely that a non-noble, who by the way despised monarchy and was a left-wing revolutionary republican in every sense of the word, would have even been given the position of finance minister, let alone chancellor, in either rank. And even if he somehow did, either Kaiser could have him sacked immediately if he ever got out of line. If the German Empire, the monarchy, had not been destroyed, Hitler never could have risen to power. Yet I once met a German who said democracy is better than monarchy, despite the fact that democracy is what gave them Hitler. And another who said Germany was better off without the Kaiser, obviously not true, as again, getting rid of the Kaiser is what allowed Hitler to come to power. It's truly ironic. I'm reminded of Disney shorts like Education for Death, in which one of the brainwashing processes employed by National Socialism was the retelling of Sleeping Beauty by saying the Wicked Witch was democracy, the Sleeping Beauty was Germany, and the prince who rescued her was Hitler. I'm also reminded of Reason and Emotion, in which the final controlling emotion, hate, was said to be
hate for the free democratic way of life. This is madness.
Down with the democracies! Sig Heil! Sig Heil! Sig Heil!
This is ironic because the people who made these shorts had, at least one small way, been brainwashed themselves. Conditioned from birth to value democracy/republicanism and consider it in and of itself to be a virtue. However, if they had a proper education, they'd realize that it was the first united German republic, modeled on their free democratic way of life, which provided the vehicle by which Hitler and his Nazis came to power in the first place. Far from starting over fresh, the current republic, which was established by people like this post-1945, was simply a resurrected, modified version of the interwar republic that provided the framework for a truly evil minority to rise by intimidation, subterfuge, and, yes, the democratic process, to dominate Germany. Yet these people still laud democracy as the solution to National Socialism and ideologies like it, because they themselves are relying on emotion rather than reason.
Yes, it's madness. Reason has been enslaved, while emotion is the master. A mad emotion, stripped of all reason, leaving nothing but ruin in its wake.
This is why Sir Winston Churchill, through reason, offered a very different solution. On the 26th of April, 1946, he said, if the Allies at the peace table at Versailles had allowed a Hohenzollern, a Wittelsbach, and a Habsburg to return to their thrones, there would have been no Hitler. A democratic basis of society might have been preserved by a crowned Weimar in contact with the victorious Allies. In short, it was not the German Empire that led to National Socialism, it was republicanism and democracy that led to National Socialism. If Snow White symbolizes the German monarchy as represented by the true Reichs, then I think it could be said that Grimhilde represents the false Reich, meaning National Socialism, and before that, the republicanism and democracy that it was born from. Like her, the false Reich gained power by unsavory means, and attempted to draw legitimacy from the true Reichs by claiming they were a successor to them, just as Grimhilde gained power by making herself a successor of sorts to the king, claiming her position by marriage. Grimhilde was not entitled to rule by right of blood, so is essentially a false monarch, just as the false Reich is false because, as it is not a monarchy, it does not have the right of blood to be an heir to the true Reichs. Grimhilde claimed the colors of the monarchy, but changed them with the overwhelming amount of black, just as the false Reich changed the colors by using an overwhelming amount of red. Unlike Snow White, whose symbolism and dress shows a Germany that embraces its culture and history as represented by its monarchy and the legacy that monarchy continues, Grimhilde's dress is very different. Yes, it too has a black, white, and red in the form of her cape, but not only are these changed by the overwhelming amount of black in her wardrobe, the dress also does not show any of the symbolism that Snow White's dress provides of the true nature of Germany as shown by its legacy. Grimhilde's dress does not show the Prussian blue of Snow White's dress, for despite claiming legitimacy from the Second Reich and being built up from its remainder, Prussia as a state did not exist, as the False Reich had rearranged the interior map of Germany and did not recognize Prussia itself as a state different from any other in Germany. unlike the Second Reich had. Her dress also does not feature the gold representing the legacy of Austrian leadership and other individual German states, as the False Reich did not consider Austria to be anything more than another German-speaking area to rule over. The individual German states had also lost their own uniqueness when they lost their monarchs with the fall of the Second Reich, and eventually not only did they lose their own cultural heritage as embodied by their individual monarchs, they were also rearranged to the point of being unrecognizable, with many of them disappearing from the map entirely. Grimhilda also does not have the royal blue trimmed with gold of Snow White's dress, as the False Reich was not a monarchy, nor did it have any sort of royal legitimacy. Instead, Grimhilda dresses in robes of a deep purple. Purple, as we know, is the color of royalty, usually symbolic of the highest level of royalty, imperialty, which in essence refers to a universal royalty, or a royalty above all others in the land.
Such as emperors.
That Grimhilda wears this color reflects her desire to be supreme, to rule over all else, and to make herself as powerful as can be, just as the False Reich desired to be supreme over Germany and make their own idea of Germany as powerful as can be. There is an irony here, though, as these indicate a split with history, a desire to be the best thing for Germany, but at the same time a lack of understanding of just what Germany truly is. Sadly, the false Germany of today, while still not understanding what Germany truly is, no longer feels it necessary to be great or powerful either, and in many cases does not even wish itself to survive. There is also a clear contrast between the true Reich, the German monarchy, as represented by Snow White, and the false Reich, as represented by Grimhilda. Snow White, like the German monarchy she represents, has an overwhelming amount of Christian themes associated with her, while Grimhilda, even by her very name, calls to mind the ancient Germanic paganism, which the False Reich admired and to a large extent sought to bring back. Snow White is... Hush, Echo.
I think Echo wants to come up on your lap.
Yes. Come here, Echo. Come here. Oh, no, maybe he doesn't.
Never mind.
Snow White is kind and submissive, as were the nobility of the German monarchy, while Grimhilda is cruel and rebellious, much like the pagan chieftains of pre-Christian Germania.
Snow White communes with the Holy Spirit, as represented by the doves that follow her around, which symbolizes the fact that a legitimate monarchy is by its nature put in place by God, while Grimhilda communes with the demonic familiar, reminding us that the falsehoods of revolutionary republicanism are, without a doubt,
See, this is why I'm doing the talking here.
you really think strongly of monarchy.
Indeed, I do.
Holy cow, this is insane. Not insane, but it's like,
Snow White communes with the Holy Spirit as represented by the doves that follow her around, which symbolizes the fact that legitimate monarchy is by its nature put in place by God, while Grimhilda communes with the demonic familiar, reminding us that the falsehoods of revolutionary republicanism are without a doubt pushed by Satan and his demons to undermine traditional authority, with it Christianity itself. Monarchy is by its nature the form of government that is the most godly, the most Christian, for it is in its very nature which relies on the miracle of birth and the guiding hand of God, while republicanism and democracy, which is the real or claimed basis of every republic, although they are not the same thing, even under the best of circumstances, are based on pride. The idea that we know what is best for us and that we will submit to no one higher than us or humble ourselves before anyone. Now that is not a Christian mindset at all. Submission to the will of God or to selfish pride, those are and always have been the only two choices. The whole issue of republicanism began as we will have the government we choose instead of the government God chooses for us. And one could even liken it to idolatry, as it implies that we can make a better choice than God. And anyone who thinks themselves capable of making a better choice than God must necessarily be placing themselves above God.
was that a smart alecky remark aimed at me?
No, I'm just emphasizing it. And this, I'd say, is the absolute worst kind of idolatry, placing your own self above God. Consider also that... Oh, wait. Actually, you can do that one.
Consider also that where Snow White puts her faith in God, even praying before she retires to sleep for the night, Grimhilda prefers to trust only in herself and her power, relying on things like witchcraft, astrology, as evidenced by the zodiac signs, carving of stars around her mirror. In the same way, these occult and pagan beliefs and values are something the False Reich placed a high value on as the False Reich, rather than looking to the Catholic Germany of the First Reich, or the Protestant-run but not overly denominational Christian Germany of the Second Reich, preferred instead to look to the pagan and occult Germany of pre-Christian Germania as their influence.
And they couldn't even do that properly, as the beliefs they promoted flip-flopped between paganism and nominal Christian beliefs/traditions, while simultaneously projecting an air of official secularism, having a socialist mentality that is inherently atheist, and also borrowing beliefs from New Age mysticism, occultism, and Oriental folk religions, which is where they got the swastika symbol from, but they of course changed it first to make it seem unique to them. Honestly, the belief system of the False Reich was a big, convoluted mess. And while Grimhilda may not demonstrate all of its facets, and really what allegory could, she does demonstrate the paganism, occultism, nominal or at least cultural Christianity due to the old world European setting surrounding her, and even atheism from a certain point of view due to her believing in no power higher than her. There is also a very key point made in the character's modes of dress about legitimacy and humility, two of the key aspects of monarchism. The character of Snow White has two main forms of dress in the film, one being rags and one being the colors of the German monarchy. When we first see Snow White in the film, she is wearing a dress made of rags, the outfit of a peasant or a scullery maid. This presents a clear sense of contrast to the Queen's fine robes of purple and black. Snow White is dressed as a peasant, but is royal in blood and noble by her actions, whereas Grimhilda, though dressed as royalty, is not royal by right of blood or noble by her actions, and is in reality nothing but a peasant, poor in blood and in character. This is a key point about legitimacy. No matter how much the False Reich adopts the customs and trappings of the true Reichs, it is still not legitimate, as it is false by the core of its nature. Likewise, the fact that Snow White is still the fairest of them all, despite being dressed in rags, emphasizes the fact that not only can legitimacy not be gained by a false system, it can also not be taken away from the true system. No matter if one takes away from them their wealth, their fine clothes, their property, their power, or their position, they are still the legitimate authority because that can only be taken away by God. In some media, stories have been explored in which Grimhilda survives her fall, only to then be told by her mirror that Snow White is still the fairest, as it is only a sleeping death, not an actual one. Well, in this instance, that rings true in this allegory, as the German monarchy represented here by Snow White is still the fairest one of all, by which I mean the legitimate government, despite having been in a sleeping death for some time now.
As for Snow White's second form of dress, he explained earlier that the blue and gold of her dress can be seen to represent the First and Second Reichs. Consequently, Snow White's dress symbolizes her nation and her culture distinctively from others. Combined with the symbolism of her first dress in the film and their nature overall, this paints a picture of distinct national cultural identity and leadership, while also demonstrating humility and the recognition that the monarch of a nation is not the highest power, for they themselves are ruled by a higher power, the heavenly monarch, who put them in power over us. This concept is the very core of Christian monarchy.
Likewise, Grimhilda's wardrobe demonstrates the other facet of this theme, which also shows that even if Snow White's example of humility did not have the rags to emphasize it, it would still make its point. What do I mean? Grimhilda's purple robes reflect her desire to be supreme, to rule over all else, but more specifically than that, they represent the desire to put oneself in power in place of the legitimate ruler, to have for oneself the position that only the legitimate ruler has, something which the False Reich did as well, and something which is bound into the very nature of republicanism. The Seven Dwarfs, on the other hand, I think represent the industrious German people, who are by their nature naturally monarchist, but only need to rediscover this. Think about it. They dress in clothes that are highly reminiscent of the military uniforms of the German Empire, the Second Reich. Note the style of the collar as well as the buttons. Each dwarf has different colors on their clothing to show the unique cultures of the individual German states as represented by their monarchs. For during the time of the true Reich, the true Germany, the history and the culture of the individual states was alive in the persons of their royal families. Reigning at the top of this union was the German Kaiser, representing all Germans as well as the unique history of the Kingdom of Prussia. This symbolism isn't limited to how the dwarfs look either, as how they act is also heavily symbolic.
Jiminy crickets!
They are by trade miners working in the mountains, which is highly reminiscent of the many mining jobs run by Kruppwerk's coal and steel in the German Empire. And like he said in his previous segment, the whole sequence of the silly song calls to mind the traditional lives of the German people, particularly the traditional German values promoted in the traditional Reich system of Germany, and particularly the German Empire or Second Reich. There's a lot of Germanys. Much of the people's lives were spent working, particularly in industrial jobs like mining, but they worked willingly and with great enthusiasm. It was still hard work, but they also got some wine at the end of the day, which traditional German folk activities, such as are exemplified in this sequence. Like the dwarfs say, the words in the song don't mean a thing, but it's alright because it's just meant to be a fun time for everyone, and boy, is it. It really does feel like a piece of German folk music, and Disney really pulled out all the stops to make it so. You've got traditional German folk instruments, exemplified by the use of strings, woodwinds, drums, and accordion, and even an old-fashioned pipe organ, which, just like everything else in the dwarf's cottage, appears to have been made by the dwarves themselves. What really makes it all work, though, is the fact that a large portion of the song consists of yodeling, or... That was terrible, but you get the idea. Probably the most well-known use of sound in German folk music, and this final touch really gives us a look into the traditional lives of German miners. However, the seven dwarves aren't just miners, they're also highly industrious, having built just about everything in their house themselves, or traded, so in this way reflect the naturally industrious nature of the German people.
The German people are also naturally monarchist. There is no system of government more uniquely suited to Germany than the German system of monarchy, the Reich. And its people have naturally recognized that when given the freedom and the information they need with which to choose.
Careful.
Careful.
You're making a lot of assumptions.
No, I'm not. This is true for just about any nation.
For you, anyways.
No, for everyone. Truth is not confined to one person.
Nor is it confined to only one point of view.
Yes, it is.
Okay, that one I screwed. Okay, those words I screwed up. Fair enough. But that doesn't mean I agree with you.
You will in time.
A German friend of mine added this information. I think a few things interplay there. Looking up to an authority or looking for guidance by an authority is quite natural. It begins with the core unit of any society, the family that is led by the father. And the natural authority of a father leads to the monarch, who is a father to his people. And as a teacher, I am an authority figure as well. And the pupils, well, most, not all of them, naturally like to be praised by an authority figure. And as the Blue Baron said, Germans are natural monarchists. We are always looking up to an authority figure. Even today, many Germans look to the state as an authority figure, even though it is a misguided state that actively harms its people.
Remember, as soon as Snow White tells them her name, they immediately recognize her as the princess.
I'm Snow White.
Snow White, the princess?
Yes.
And Doc says, or at least tries to say, we're honored. Grumpy, of course, is against Snow White staying with them at the beginning, but he does make clear a very crucial point when he says,
I'm warning you. If the queen finds her here, she'll swoop down and wreak her vengeance on us.
This is actually a surprisingly clear allegory to what the False Reich did to strong supporters of the monarchy.
Oh yeah, it's all coming together.
Remember, there were a great deal of German monarchists thrown in concentration camps, too. For example, there was Reinhold Wohl, who in 1933 had begun to organize his supporters around a new organization, the monarchist German Freedom Society. His work was focused on Prussia, and he concentrated his efforts there to build a movement that would renew feelings of loyalty toward the House of Hohenzollern and lead ultimately to the return of the monarchy.
However, in 1938, he was arrested for violating the law which banned all parties and organizations besides the National Socialist German Workers' Party, and he of course lost his seat in the Reich Chamber. Originally confined to a prison in Berlin, after the start of World War II he was moved to the Sachsenhausen concentration camp in 1940. The naturally monarchist nature of the dwarfs is also shown in that, after some convincing, the 7 dwarfs agree to harbor Snow White and also endeavor to listen to the wisdom she has to offer, as is seen when they agree to wash up for dinner. True, Grumpy requires a bit of persuasion from the other dwarfs, but by the end of the film...
Persuasion?
Yes, persuasion.
They dump him in and scrub him by force.
But by the end of the film, even he is won over by Snow White. Also, as a side note, I noticed while watching the film again for this review that the dwarfs, aside from 1 or 2 instances of Doc saying something like,
Go right on up now, my dear.
almost always refer to Snow White as either princess when directly speaking to her, or the princess when speaking to each other about her. This is yet another instance of their natural inclination to honor royalty, and it's worth noting that this inclination is naturally found in every nation's people. They simply need to understand it better.
Meh. Not everyone.
Yes, everyone. Every nation has had a monarchy. The only 2 nations that, in fact, Switzerland and the United States are really the only nations Republican by default. And even Switzerland was formed out of the Holy Roman Empire, a monarchy, and the United States came into being because the separate colonies, which had been settled by a monarchy, the United Kingdom, chose to rebel against it. Not a single nation.
Taxation without representation, that was the issue. Using monarchists,
actually,
that was one of the main defining
Actually, that was a
issues.
complete and total red herring. When Benjamin Franklin was sent to Britain as a sort of envoy for the colonies, he was told under no uncertain terms not to agree to any deal that gave them representation in the British Parliament, because they knew that with their much smaller population they would be easily outvoted, thus dooming themselves to democratic defeat while simultaneously losing an entirely too popular and catchy slogan. Taxation without representation was a complete and total red herring.
Well, I'm sorry, that's just what I've heard in history books.
Not all history books get it right, especially the American ones. They have to justify it. Remember, history is written by the victors. Finally, the unseen king in the film could be seen to represent the Second Reich, which Grimhilda and the False Reich attempt to claim legitimacy from, while the person of Snow White becomes the symbol of the rightful successor whose legitimacy is true, in a sense representing the true Reich, the monarchy, which still waits to be restored. Why is the Queen so envious of Snow White? Because deep down she knows that Snow White is the true successor. The Queen taking on her hag form can be seen as her finally dropping all pretense of legitimacy and revealing her true colors within, just as the False Reich did when it banned the imperial tricolor of the German Empire in 1935 for being reactionary, and established their own party's flag as the sole flag of Germany, thus revealing their true colors as a revolutionary, republican movement, and not a reactionary, conservative, or right-wing movement at all.
To love the Führer is a great disgrace, so we Heil, Heil, right in the Führer's face. So we Heil, Heil, right in the Führer's face.
If National Socialism had actually been a reactionary or right-wing movement, they would have not only kept the imperial tricolor of the German Empire, they would have made it the sole flag, they would have restored the monarchy, they would have restored all the heraldry and symbols therein, and they would have gotten rid of the presidency, of course. It's amazing how people can be so stupid, isn't it?
Yes, it's madness. Reason has been enslaved, while emotion is the master. A mad emotion, stripped of all reason, leaving nothing but ruin in its wake.
And her poisoning of Snow White obviously represents the blame and the shame that the False Reich brought on the true Reich, leading to the sleeping death of the monarchy.
The Queen's death then represents the death of the false Reich, but alas, the true Reich, the monarchy, still lays in a sleeping death awaiting restoration, which will come in the form of a monarch much like the prince.
Wait a second, the prince's most prominent colors are red, white, and blue. You think that maybe they're saying the United Kingdom will someday be the one to save the German monarchy?
Possibly, and that was my first thought regarding their symbolism as well. But look at his clothes again. I feel like there are multiple possibilities with this example. Remember what I said about Snow White's cape? Well, the prince's cape is red on the back and appears to be black in the interior. Now, upon closer inspection, it's the same color as his hair, which, when seen next to Snow White's, is shown to be a very dark brown rather than black, but let's just call it black for simplicity's sake here. Anyway, when looking at the prince from top to bottom, you see black at his head, white at his collar, then red at his cape, then white again at his sleeves, then black again at the cape's interior. Again, we see the black, white, and red imperial colors of the German Empire, whose theme is made even more apparent by the gray of his pants. Gray, as we all know, being the color of the combat uniforms of the Imperial German Army. Finally, the royal blue and gold trim of his sleeveless overtunic is there to denote his royal status and his continuation of the German monarchy.
So basically we have some awkward possible Kaiserreich going on or something?
Kaiserreich? No.
Many royals being related across Europe.
There's a certain aspect to that. His outfit also reminded me of something else. Blue with gold sits atop white, and is crowned by red. This reminds me of the legends regarding how the King of France was approached by a mystic of the church and told that he should place the Sacred Heart of Jesus upon their flag, which would have meant crowning with red the white, blue, and gold. And that leads into the prophecies surrounding the great monarch who, after restoring the throne of France, will lead the world into the age of monarchical restoration and the last great resurgence of Christianity before the final age. I'm actually not making that up. It's a real prophecy. Read up on it and see. There's a lot of history behind it. It's very interesting, actually. Anyway, interestingly enough, it's said that this monarch will have the blood of both France and Germany. And when I look at the prince's outfit, I can see the colors of these two monarchies overlapping quite beautifully. I didn't even think of this until just as I was finishing this section of the review, but when I did, it just fit so well that I just had to include it. The prince, then, I think, can be seen to represent the great monarch, and his part in the worldwide restoration of monarchy is said to include that of every nation, restoring to each nation the monarchy that God himself put in place over them, and the natural order of Christendom, each nation following its natural monarch, and each monarch pointing their nation to God. The dwarfs, the German monarchists, the supporters of the old order naturally cheer at this, and its restoration leads them into the greatest celebration they have ever had. The best part, though, regarding the monarchist narrative in this story is that though the story of Snow White is a German fairy tale, its themes of legitimacy and the rightful ruler being naturally the truest representative of their nation's culture, allow it to be used just as well as a teaching tool for any monarchy, and especially any in Europe. Germany is not really Germany anymore without a Kaiser, and the individual German states have lost so many of their own unique traditions without having their own monarchs to embody them. But just as this is true for Germany, so too is it true for others. A republic does not represent the heritage of Italy in the way its monarchy did. Nor, despite certainly having improved after the failure and collapse of communism, is the Russian Federation a proper representation of the values and culture that Russia was built on under the Tsars. In the words of the mad monarchist, France is another example. There are those who think that the Republic and the whole culture of the Revolution have been around so long that there is no separating France from it. They are one and the same. Not true. There was an older France, a more noble and sacred France that has virtually nothing whatsoever to do with the strutting posers who occupy Paris today. I think about those quite attractive propaganda posters featuring the image of St. Joan of Arc urging people to give to help the war effort. Very nice, very inspiring, but the painful truth is that St. Joan of Arc would not even recognize France today or even then. That was a different France. That was the France of Clovis, Charlemagne, St. Louis, and Versailles, not the France of guillotines, multiculturalism, and moral relativism. The monarchist narrative contained within Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs makes some key points about monarchy from the perspective of both legitimacy and cultural representation. And when brought up, it can encourage people to do their own research on the matter as well. That is true wisdom, for it not only teaches, it also inspires people to learn. Ignore the royal wisdom contained in this white and gold book, and you will ultimately be brought to ruin like Brunhilde and the false rank. But take heed of this royal wisdom, and you will be brought to the happiness that comes from the understanding of faith, tradition, and monarchy, just like Snow White, and the supporters of the truly noble values she represents. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was an extremely significant film for not just Disney, but animation as a whole. But more than that, Snow White is a true treasure because of its Christian and monarchist allegory, and the lessons it endeavors to teach. It is for that reason that we shall memorialize it today, and in doing so introduce what will become a key feature of our reviews here at Blue Baron Productions. A film that includes one or more of the facets of our motto is a treasure, not just physically, but spiritually. And I can think of no better place for a treasure of such nature than a reliquary. I'm the Blue Baron, defender of traditionalism. God bless you all, and remember, Fides Traditio Monarchia. Huh, wait a minute. What is getting here? Something else, too. Well, it's clear that I have a lot more to learn about this.
Franz den Kaiser, unseren guten Kaiser Franz. Hoch als Herrscher, hoch als Weiser, steht er in des Ruhmes Glanz. Liebe windet Lorbeerreiser, ihm zu ewig grünem Glanz. Gott erhalte Franz den Kaiser, unseren guten Kaiser Franz. Gott erhalte Franz den Kaiser, unseren guten Kaiser Franz. Über blühende Gefilde reicht sein Zepter weit und breit. Säulen seines Throns sind milde, Widersinn und Redlichkeit. Und von seinem Wappenschilde strahlet die Gerechtigkeit. Gott erhalte Franz den Kaiser, unseren guten Kaiser Franz. Gott erhalte Franz den Kaiser, unseren guten Kaiser Franz. Sich mit Tugenden zu schmücken, achtet er der Sorgen wert, nicht um Völker zu erdrücken, flammt in seiner Hand das Schwert, sie zu segnen, zu beglücken.